I want to tell you about something that's been sitting in most people's medicine cabinets for decades. A brown bottle, 3%, costs under $2. You probably have one right now. Now here's what I didn't expect when I moved out to Oregon and started this garden seriously. That same bottle, the one you use for a scraped knee, turned out to be one of the most useful things I had. Not inside the house, out here, in the soil. And the more I looked into why it worked, the more I kept asking, why doesn't anyone talk about this? Because the answer when you dig into the chemistry, and I mean really dig, is that this compound isn't just safe. It's something the soil actually recognizes, something roots understand. 9 things. Most gardeners never learn a single one of them. And one of them, number 6, is something I wish someone had told me 15 years ago before I lost an entire bed of tomatoes. Most people think hydrogen peroxide is a product, something manufactured, something artificial, and I understand why. It comes in a plastic bottle from the pharmacy. You buy it, you put it in the cabinet, and that's where the story ends for most folks. But here's what I learned, and it genuinely shifted how I think about this garden. Hydrogen peroxide forms naturally in the atmosphere. When sunlight, oxygen, and water vapor interact high above us, they produce H2O2, and it comes down in every raindrop, every single one. It's been landing in this soil since long before either of us was standing here. When that rainwater hits the soil and releases that extra oxygen atom, it creates a brief, mild flush of oxidation right at the root zone. Your soil has known this molecule for a very long time. It knows exactly what to do with it. Think of it like opening a window. You've been in a sealed room all day, stuffy, a little stale. Someone opens a window. The air moves. Things that were sitting dormant wake up. That's what this molecule does at the root level. It aerates. It activates. It signals. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. The dilution I use, 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide in a quart of water, is stronger than what comes down in a raindrop. Rainwater carries this compound in trace amounts, fractions of a millionth of a gram per liter, depending on conditions. The garden application is more concentrated than rain, which is precisely why I use it once a week rather than every day. It's a supplement, not a substitute, a top-up, not a flood. The way the Creator designed this root system to work, with oxygen, with circulation, with that brief daily oxidation from morning dew, that's the principle we're working with here. So when I started watering my seedlings with this mixture, I wasn't introducing something foreign to the soil. I was reinforcing a process the earth has been running for a very long time. Here's how I do it. You need 3% hydrogen peroxide, the standard brown bottle from any drugstore, and plain water. That's it. 2 ingredients. 1 teaspoon of the peroxide goes into a full quart of water. Stir it gently, or just swirl the jar. That's your solution. Then water your seedlings or transplants with this once a week. Use it in place of one of your regular waterings. Not every day. Once. Think of it as your rain day, even when the Oregon sky isn't cooperating. Root rot. If you've gardened for more than 2 seasons, you've probably lost something to it. A pot that got waterlogged, a raised bed where the drainage wasn't quite right. You pull up the plant expecting to find roots, and what you get is mush. Dark, soft, smells like pond water. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. The culprit in most cases is a category of water mold, organisms like Pythium and Phytophthora, that thrive exactly where roots are sitting in oxygen-starved, saturated soil. They are not technically fungi, though they behave like them. They are, if I'm being precise, humicetes, water molds. And the thing about these organisms is that they love conditions where oxygen is scarce. Waterlogged, stagnant, suffocating. That's the environment they want. Hydrogen peroxide releases oxygen directly into the root zone. When you water with a dilute solution, you are not poisoning the mold so much as destroying the environment it needs to survive. You're flooding a suffocating space with something it can't tolerate, air. It's not a chemical attack, it's an environmental reset. I lost a whole flat of basil 3 years ago, or was it 4, to damping off. The same water mold family. Little seedlings coming up strong, and then overnight they just keeled over at the stem. Translucent, like a candle going out. I know that feeling. And since I started the weekly peroxide watering on new transplants, I have not had it happen once. Not once. Now, to be clear, if the rot is severe, if the roots are already black and soft and coming apart in your hands, peroxide is not going to reverse that damage. You need to cut out the dead sections and repot in fresh, well-draining mix. But as a preventative, and in mild early cases, the evidence, both from research and from my own beds, is very encouraging. If you suspect early root rot, here's what I do. Remove the plant carefully from its container. Rinse the roots under cool running water. You want to see what you're working with. Mix 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide into a quart of water. Submerge the roots in this solution for about 30 minutes. You'll often see fine bubbling. That's the oxygen releasing at the root surface. That's exactly what you want. While that's soaking, repot into fresh, dry, well-draining mix. After you replant, water once more with the same diluted solution. Then leave it alone for a week. Let the root zone breathe. Don't fuss with it. Seeds are remarkable things. A dry seed can sit on a shelf for years, dormant, patient, waiting. The life inside it is paused, not gone, and then you put it in damp soil and something wakes up. Some signal gets through. The embryo stirs. Growth begins. I never stop finding that remarkable. That waking up process, germination, is triggered partly by moisture and partly by what that moisture contains. In nature, seeds often sit in leaf litter and damp soil, where natural decomposition is happening around them. That process produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide as a byproduct. The seed coat, the outer shell that keeps the embryo safe during storage, is designed in part to respond to exactly this kind of signal. Research published in Frontiers in Plant Science confirms that hydrogen peroxide functions as a genuine signaling molecule in seed physiology. It helps the seed read environmental cues, weakens the seed coat at the right moment, and triggers the hormonal cascade that kicks germination into gear. The seed coat on many varieties is a tough little barrier, protective. A hard pea or carrot seed can take weeks just to absorb enough moisture to get started. A pre-soak in dilute hydrogen peroxide softens that outer layer slightly, just enough, and delivers a signal the seed recognizes from its natural environment. You're essentially telling it, conditions are right, the soil is active, it's time. I noticed this myself with my parsley. Parsley is notoriously slow. It can take 3 full weeks to germinate under normal conditions. There's even an old saying that parsley goes to the devil and back 7 times before it comes up. Well, I've gotten mine down to 10 or 11 days with a peroxide pre-soak, consistently, every single time. The 24-hour soak window matters too. Research suggests that soaking beyond 24 hours can actually start to reduce seedling vigor after germination. So the protocol is precise. Soak overnight, sow immediately. Don't let them sit around once they've been drained. 24 hours before you plan to sow, measure out 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide into a small bowl of water. About half a cup is plenty. Drop your seeds in. Let them soak overnight, 12 to 24 hours. Not much longer than that. In the morning, drain and sow immediately. Don't let them dry out between draining and planting. That defeats the purpose. The window between draining and sowing should be minutes, not hours. Late August in my garden. Every year, same as clockwork, the squash gets powdery mildew, white, chalky patches spreading from the older leaves outward, slow at first, then fast. It doesn't kill the plants immediately, but it drains them. The leaf can't photosynthesize properly when it's covered in fungal threads. Output drops. The plant puts energy into fighting the infection instead of setting fruit, and once it gets going across a bed, it spreads by air, spores drifting from plant to plant on the slightest breeze. Powdery mildew is actually a group of related fungi. The specific species depends on which plant they're targeting. They colonize the surface of the leaf rather than penetrating the tissue deeply, which is part of what makes them both easy to spot early, and, if you catch them in time, manageable without anything heavy. Hydrogen peroxide, applied as a foliar spray, works against these surface pathogens directly. When the solution contacts the fungal colony, that extra oxygen atom is released as an oxidative burst right at the point of contact. The fungus can't withstand it. The leaf itself, being a living organism with its own antioxidant systems, recovers. The fungus, without those defenses on its surface, does not. The USDA's own technical review on hydrogen peroxide in organic agriculture states this plainly. Hydrogen peroxide is particularly effective against fungal diseases on plant surfaces, including powdery mildew, precisely because it contacts the surface pathogen without penetrating deeper into plant tissue. That's the mechanism in plain language. Surface contact, oxidative disruption, recovery by the plant. For a working spray, 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide in a quart of plain water. That's it. Mix fresh each time. Diluted peroxide loses its potency within a day. Spray in the early morning so the leaves dry completely before the midday sun. Mix your spray. 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide in a quart of plain water. Mix fresh each session. Don't store the diluted solution. Pour into a clean spray bottle. Spray the affected leaves, top and bottom. The underside matters. That's where spores shelter and where new colonies take hold first. Get the mist under there. Do this every 3 to 4 days while you're seeing active mildew. Once it clears, once a week as a preventative is plenty. Don't overdo it. Here's one that most gardeners don't think about until they've paid for not thinking about it. Your pruning shears, your grafting knife, your tomato clips, and your rose ties. Every time you cut into a plant, you're opening a wound. And if the blade you just used carried bacteria or fungal spores from the previous plant, that wound becomes a door, an entry point, an invitation. I learned this the hard way. Years ago, I was pruning a rose showing signs of black spot, and I went straight to my tomatoes without stopping. By the end of that week, I had spots on the tomatoes that had absolutely no business being there. The connection wasn't obvious at first. Then it was. Now I stop between plants. Every single time, no exceptions. The standard recommendation for tool sanitization is a bleach solution, usually 10%, and bleach works fine against both bacteria and fungal spores. But bleach corrodes metal over time. It pits the blades, it attacks the joint, and if you're not rinsing thoroughly, you're leaving a residue that can itself damage plant tissue. Hydrogen peroxide at 3%, used straight from the bottle without diluting, is equally effective against common garden pathogens and carries none of those trade-offs. No corrosion, no residue after it dries, no rinse required. Keep a small jar of 3% hydrogen peroxide near your pruning station. A jam jar works perfectly. It costs almost nothing to set up, and it stays effective for weeks in a covered container. Between plants, especially when moving from anything visibly diseased to healthy specimens, dip the blades in for 30 seconds. No rinsing needed. Let it air dry or wipe with a clean cloth. At the end of a full pruning session, do a 5-minute soak. Then wipe down and put a drop of food-grade mineral oil on the joint if you want to preserve the metal long-term. Number 6. This is the one I mentioned in the hook. The one I wish someone had told me 15 years ago. Early blight in tomatoes. It starts quietly. Small brown spots with yellow halos on the lowest, oldest leaves. The spots have a distinctive concentric ring pattern, like the rings of a tree stump. Then it moves upward, leaf by leaf, as the season warms. The leaves yellow and drop. If you don't stop it, you can lose the whole lower canopy before the fruit has finished setting, and what's left of the plant is weakened, stressed, and a poor producer. The culprit is Alternaria species, primarily Alternaria linearia in tomatoes. It thrives in the temperature swings we get here in the Pacific Northwest. Cool, damp nights followed by warm days, and it overwinters in the soil and on leftover plant debris. So, if you had blight last year and didn't clear out the beds thoroughly, it's there waiting. That's just the truth of it. The same foliar spray I use for powdery mildew, 1 tablespoon of 3% peroxide per quart of water, applied preventatively to the undersides and tops of the lower leaves from early in the season, has been one of the most consistent disease management tools I've found for my tomatoes. And I've tried a lot of tools. Neem, copper spray, compost tea, all of them have a role. but this one costs almost nothing, and it works in a way that makes biological sense. It disrupts the fungal surface colony the same way it does with mildew, and the lower leaves, the primary infection point, stay cleaner through the season. I'm not saying it's a cure. Let me be very clear about that. Once blight has taken hold of a plant, halfway up, leaves dropping daily, you're managing decline, not reversing it, but as a weekly preventative from the time transplants go in, started before any symptoms appear. That changed my tomato season, fundamentally. Starting about 2 weeks after your tomato transplants go in the ground, once they're established, mix your preventative spray, 1 tablespoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide per quart of plain water. Fresh each session. Focus on the lower third of the plant and get under the leaves. Early blight starts at the base and works upward. You're protecting the foundation. Once a week through warm, humid stretches. If you've had a wet night followed by a warm morning, that's prime blight weather. That's your reminder. That's your spray day. Not everyone is growing in soil. I get messages from folks growing in water, hydroponic systems, herb jars on a kitchen windowsill, small aquaponic setups in a spare room. And the challenge with growing roots in standing water is almost always the same problem: oxygen, or rather the lack of it. Here's something that surprises people. Roots need oxygen just as much as leaves do. We don't think about it because in soil, the spaces between particles handle that naturally. The root hairs are always touching air pockets, but in standing water, those air pockets are gone. The roots have to extract dissolved oxygen from the water itself. And when that dissolved oxygen runs low, which it will, especially in a warm, sealed container, the plant shifts into a less efficient mode of respiration. Growth slows, and those same water molds we talked about in Thing 2, they're waiting for exactly that moment. Hydrogen peroxide releases dissolved oxygen directly into the water column. When you add a small amount to your reservoir, it breaks down, within minutes, into water and oxygen. That oxygen disperses through the water and gives the root zone a temporary boost. It's acting here not as a disinfectant, but as an oxygen delivery system, a simple, safe, inexpensive way to raise the dissolved oxygen level between water changes. For a standard hydroponic reservoir, say a 5-gallon container, add 2 teaspoons of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon at each water change. 5 gallons, 10 teaspoons total. One important note: don't add it to freshly nutrient-amended water. The peroxide can react with certain compounds in hydroponic nutrient solutions and break them down. Add the peroxide first, let it sit for 10 minutes, then add your nutrients. Check your roots regularly. Healthy hydroponic roots should be white or cream, firm and slightly fuzzy with root hairs. When they start turning brown and slimy, your dissolved oxygen is too low, or your water temperature is too warm. Both things want correcting. My compost pile is one of the things I'm genuinely proud of out here. Dark, crumbly, smells like forest floor, not like rot. It took me years to get it right, and what it does for the garden is something no bag of anything from a store has ever matched, in my experience. Good compost is a blessing from the soil, given back. Good compost depends on microbial activity. Billions of bacteria, fungi, and other decomposers are working through your kitchen scraps and garden waste, breaking complex materials down into the simple compounds your soil can actually use. And those organisms need oxygen to do their best work. That's what aerobic decomposition means, composting in the presence of oxygen. When it's working well, the pile stays warm in the center from all that microbial activity, and the breakdown is fast and clean. When a compost pile goes anaerobic, when the center becomes too compacted, too wet, too oxygen-starved, the beneficial aerobic microbes slow down and the wrong kind take over, sulfur-producing bacteria. The pile smells wrong, sour and swampy, and breakdown slows to a crawl. What should take 3 months can take a year or more. I've had this happen in a wet Oregon autumn, and it's genuinely frustrating. Adding a dilute hydrogen peroxide solution to a slow or stalled compost pile works in 2 ways simultaneously. It introduces dissolved oxygen to the parts of the pile that have become anaerobic, and it provides a mild sanitizing effect if the microbial balance has tipped toward pathogens. Think of it as a gentle reset. You're not sterilizing the pile, You're nudging the conditions back toward what the aerobic decomposers need to get back to work. Mix 1 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide into a gallon of water. This is a notably stronger mix than the foliar spray or the seedling watering. We're working with a dense mass of material that can handle more, and we need enough volume to penetrate into the center layers. Pour the solution over the pile and then turn it immediately with a fork, working the liquid through the interior. The turning does as much work as the peroxide. That's what reintroduces physical airflow to the compacted zones. Do this once a week on a stalled pile, alongside your regular turning. Within 2 to 3 weeks, if the moisture and carbon-nitrogen balance are in range, you should notice the smell changing, back toward that clean, earthy tone that tells you things are working again. At the end of a growing season, or at the very beginning of one, there's a window of time where the beds are empty. No plants in, no plants out. Just soil and whatever is living in it. And what's living in it matters more than most gardeners realize. Soil pathogens overwinter. Fungal spores overwinter. The same blight we talked about in Thing 6 is sitting in the top layer of that soil right now, exactly where last year's tomatoes were, waiting for the temperature and humidity to come back around. You didn't end the disease cycle. When the season ended, you paused it. A hydrogen peroxide drench at the start of spring, applied a week or 2 before transplants go in, gives you a meaningful head start on that cycle. Now, I want to be careful here, because there is an important distinction to understand. This is not sterilization. You do not want to sterilize your soil. Sterilization kills the beneficial microorganisms, the mycorrhizal fungi, the decomposing bacteria, the nematodes that eat fungal pathogens, right alongside the harmful ones. You'd be starting with dead soil, and that creates more problems than it solves. What a shallow hydrogen peroxide drench does instead is target the surface zone, the top 2 to 3 inches, where overwintered spores are at their densest. The peroxide is active and then breaks down within hours, leaving no residue. Research from ACS Omega on soil treatment with hydrogen peroxide found it has microbicidal and sporicidal activity in the surface zone, while deeper soil biology remains substantially less affected. That's the window we're working in. Surface sanitation, not deep sterilization. I do this every spring, the week before my transplants go in. 1 thorough drench, 3 days of rest, then plant. And I'll tell you, it's the single thing I recommend most often to folks who write in asking about disease problems that come back year after year in the same beds. The soil is carrying the problem over. You have to address the soil. For a standard 4x8 raised bed, mix about half a cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide into 1 gallon of water. This is your drench solution. Water the bed thoroughly and evenly. You want the solution reaching the top 2 to 3 inches of soil, not pooling on the surface, not running off. A rose head on your watering can helps distribute it evenly. Let it rest for 3 to 5 days before planting. By then, the peroxide has broken down completely into water and oxygen. No residue, no trace, nothing waiting to harm young roots. Just fresher, better oxygenated soil with a reduced pathogen load at the surface. And then plant. Plant into that bed knowing you gave it the best start you could. That's good stewardship. That's taking care of what's been given to us. 9 things. 1 brown bottle, under $2 at most pharmacies. I've been gardening seriously for going on 15 years now, and I spent the first 10 of them never thinking twice about this compound. It was a first aid item, a scraped knee fix. That was where my relationship with it ended. The thing is, when you understand what it actually is at the root level, it stops being a product and starts being a principle. Oxygen delivery, environmental signaling, the thing rain has been doing to this soil since long before either of us was standing in a garden, trusting that the earth would take care of the growing. I'm not telling you to throw away your other tools, your neem oil, your compost tea, your beneficial nematodes. They all have their place, but I'm telling you not to overlook the brown bottle. It's been earning its keep out here for years, and I suspect it will for years more. Now, I have a question for you, and I genuinely want to know the answer. Drop it in the comments below. Of the 9 uses we went through today, the seed soak, the root rot rescue, the foliar spray, the seasonal bed prep, Which one are you planning to try first? And have you used hydrogen peroxide in your garden before? If you have, tell me what you used it for and whether it worked. I read every single one of these. If this was useful, if it made you think differently about something sitting in your medicine cabinet right now, hit subscribe. I put out a new video every week, all of it grounded in the same thing, what the science actually says, translated into what works between the beds. Take good care of your soil, folks. It'll take good care of you. God bless you.